everybody. Welcome to the Standing Light podcast. I'm your host, Leyla Salvadé, and I am so excited to have one of my dearest soul sisters today, Nicole Gibson, founder of Love Out Loud movement. And I want to share your bio briefly so we can introduce your beautiful essence to this beautiful community. So Nicole is known as a multi-award-winning social entrepreneur, but she prefers to be seen as an unstoppable messenger of love and human potential. I love that. Listed as the Financial Review's top 100 most influential women, Pride of Australia medalist and finalist for the Young Australian of the Year, Nicole has impacted millions of people worldwide with her unconventional models of community development and transformation. Currently, Nicole is the CEO of a global movement, Love Out Loud, engaging 4% of the global population to hit critical mass and shift humanity's baseline from fear to love. Love Out Loud is now focused on the development of technologies that can measure belief systems rapidly, being able to transform and direct human conscious at scale. No big deal. I love you. I'm like your biggest fan.
As complex as it sounds. Yeah. I'm your biggest fan, Leyla. Hey to your beautiful Standing Light community. What a cool thing to be kicking off this podcast with you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And we met years ago in London, even though we have so many soul fam from A-Fest, Mind Valley.
Yeah, my nickname for Leyla was my membership club friend, because every time we met in London, it was always at a membership club. And there were all different membership clubs. Yeah, it was like Soho House, and then there was that other one we went to. But good time. It was good times.
It was. And you're in Australia now, which is originally where you're from, right?
Yeah, sort of. Grew up in London, but I am Australian.
Okay. Share a little bit about like your upbringing and where you came from, because I feel like you also are very like a third culture kid, kind of.
Oh yeah, totally. It was very much like that. It's probably another reason we connect so deeply. I was born in Australia, and I was here until 6, and then moved to the UK. And there was always a lot of travel. There was a different school every year. So now I didn't understand it at the time, or even when I felt interested in moving into like, being a facilitator of transformational work and creating transformation in the world. It never occurred to me that I sort of graduated my childhood with a PhD in change, which was the upside. That was the upside of so much transition and change, and I guess naturally wired to think differently. Resilience, yeah, there's definitely that. Adaptability, I think, flexibility, all of these skills. But really, like, that was so core to my experience growing up, and now it's actually the crux of the theory of change behind everything that I do and create. That our relationship to change really is one of the most defining relationships we have in our life. Right. And a lot of us, because of experiencing, what I now sort of explain as our early initiations, our early rite of passages, a lot of us experience pain, sort of, or trauma around them, because we weren't sort of properly equipped, supported, held, seen, heard. That's created this relationship with change that evokes, for many of us, this sort of innate resistance. Yeah. And then that's where a lot of the stagnancy and ultimately suffering can come from, when we're resisting this change that's trying to sort of, this evolutionary pull that's always trying to move through us. Whereas for me, I struggle in the opposite ways when I'm somewhere too long. So COVID was a big test, so some of my biggest tests in life have actually been learning to stay with something, especially locationally, for long periods of time, except for my mission, which is definitely the longest standing relationship in my life. But yeah, I left school when I was mainstream school, when I was 14, to pursue performance, which was my first love. And I loved what I loved, like the training and the acting was a love for sure. But what I loved most was people coming together to have a shared experience, and an experience that was really raw. That's what I adored about performing. And inevitably, that's still kind of what draws me to the work that I've done over the years. Because what I always felt growing up in all of the transition and kind of getting to observe so many different environments all the time, there was always for me this sense that there was presence that was missing in the world, that so much was happening that no one was really there for it, you know, and there was so much that was getting missed. And that used to really hurt me a lot, because I always felt very present to what was going on. And so it evoked, and I'm sure that many of your community members probably felt this as well, this sense of separation or kind of loneliness, isolation in that, which is actually an asset. I think when you've been to those places, you develop, as anyone on the fringes of anything, a really unique perspective of the world. And what I love to empower leaders to realize is, like, if that was your experience, or that might still be your experience, then like learning to articulate that, learning to use it in your creation, means that what you're going to create is so much more unique and needed. And that was 100%, you know, my journey, but I didn't have those skills when I was really young. So inevitably, I was in this environment with this thing that I loved, which was performance. And it was very like spiritual work, but my director never sort of explained it as spiritual work. But Meisner, which was the acting method that I was trained in, was actually about being 100% yourself under the given imaginary circumstances. So the training method was to basically look at, if you were cast in a set of circumstances that put you in a position where you were, let's use something that most people don't want to be associated with, like a liar or a cheat or, you know, whatever. And these triggers in your own ego come up and they de-identify with that. The training for this acting style was actually about basically humbling those parts of your ego so that you could look at the part of you that actually would show up as that.
That's like
so
parts therapy. That's like internal family systems.
Exactly. It's like there's so many facilitation sort of methods that are like this, but this was very immersive and it was very foundational years for me. So it definitely shaped me. But then on the other hand, I didn't have all of the wisdom, you know, that we now have around self-love and compassion as a philosophy of life. And so there was a massive descent in that experience for me, even though what I was learning was so rich. I didn't know how to properly integrate it. And that sort of put me on a very deep journey of mental health challenges very young. And I think it was that experience where I had this thing that I loved and this wisdom that I gained through the art form, but then this very real experience of pain and suffering. And then all of this change and the forming of me through all of this change that kind of came together to catalyze my journey as an entrepreneur.
That's so beautiful. And I think it's exactly those perspectives that, I mean, you said, you know, you tried so many different things and it's been hard for you to like stay grounded, but the vision was always the same. And I think so many entrepreneurs can relate to that, especially if you're working in the name of love and light. And not to sound woo-woo or anything, but it's just like, you know, when you are connected with that and you just let your heart be your ultimate compass and guide you, there are so many things that will come and inspire us. And then because we trust in that, we listen to it, right? And then we'll get these intuitive notions or nudges, right? And then we'll go towards them and then we'll try that out for a while. And then it might not be 100% in resonance in that moment, maybe, and then we shift over. So I can completely relate with that as well, because I mean, the amount of times that I've shifted the focus of Standing Light, but ultimately the main focus was always to bring people back into their heart and educate them on that power within them, which we share that vision and mission, I think, in so many ways. You know, it gets to ultimately, I think in that alone, in that process, we're ultimately covering all those different facets or visiting all those different facets. And then ultimately we kind of land in that like center point and we're just like, oh, this is it, right? But it's influenced and inspired by all the facets that we got to kind of, yeah, go visit.
Totally. Yeah. I think really when I learned to really listen and like, you know, there's so many layers to what that actually means,
Yeah.
but really, really, really listen.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, I think, about how that journey's taken me to even what I'm developing now with technology, which sort of short synopsis just for context is basically being able to measure the resonance of truth in the body so that we can measure things like belief systems, for instance. So sort of measuring the immeasurable through our own biosignals. But the journey of listening really exposed me to this truth that actually exists in everyone, you know. And as I started to see that, I started to see that there is a form in the formless, you know. And the process of creation it's always evolving.
Yeah.
And whether you're seeing it through, I guess, a more spiritual lens, like maybe we do, or you're just seeing it, you know, in the hardline kind of really commercial entrepreneurial lens, it's about really understanding like what is the bigger thing that you're connected to. Because even an entrepreneur that's not spiritually minded, the best entrepreneurs in the world, it's less about the function of what they're building now, and it's more about what problem are we solving. And I think allowing that to take many forms, and also being able to lean in and practice the discipline required to get it done, which definitely for me is something that I actively train daily, because as your mission grows, you know, and you're responsible for more capital, more people, more things, it's important to be consistent. Like consistency is a really important part of creation, but not rigid. And I think that's the sweet spot. Yeah.
You're talking about, you know, bringing the formless into the form, and that's happening right now on such a collective level, but almost in a subconscious way, right? Where people are still, we're at this place now where I feel, even, you know, with the clients I'm seeing and speaking, or I work in like a clinical environment, and then I work in my own environment where, you know, clients will be attracted to me, not just given to me. And there's a huge difference there, but I can sense and feel into that space as well, where it's like, okay, from this side where people are just coming to me because they're resonating with me and my message, we can go super quickly into the formless.
Yeah.
But then the other more clinical world, right? We're still teetering. We're still like, oh, is it safe? Can we talk about this? You know, are we going to get ostracized for saying this or going there? You know, there's still that fear. And I think as a collective, we are very much being transformed through that specifically now. It's happening on so many different levels in so many different ways. Even the divine feminine coming more and more to surface, and us understanding not just God, but also goddess, that there isn't just one or the other. It's both together, right?
It's that which can't be named. I think it's so
Exactly.
It's so human, you know.
Yeah.
It's so human to want to or to think that we can define something that's so indefinable. You know, it's like it's such an impossible thing for us to. It's not dual, it's not binary. Like
It's not.
yeah, it's beyond all of that. But I so agree. Like the collective unconscious is being mirrored back to us, or what it has been over the past couple of years, I think, in such an extreme way. And there's such a gift in that, you know. Like obviously the past couple of years has been so hard for so many people, and it's not to underestimate that pain. businesses, on families, people that lost loved ones. At the same time, being able to look at the gifts in what we've undergone as a world. Like, I don't think ever before has the world had a completely shared experience, for starters. Even during wars, there wasn't media as we had media over the past couple of years.
Right.
And it was still, in somewhat isolated parts of the world, but this was a completely collective experience. And we got to see that it was so fitting to how I see Love Out Loud's mission, that the entirety of the collective consciousness actually can be directed in a single way. Now, what if we were to just look at that and be like, well, what if that was towards compassion? What if that was towards peace? What if that was towards love? And I think it surely has become harder now for people to argue whether or not that's possible, because we just lived through it, but with uncertainty and fear and anxiety and all of the more difficult emotions that we've been through. It's now been proven that we can have a shared experience in that way.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about Love Out Loud.
Where to begin? In order to really understand Love Out Loud, actually, I'll start with, the philosophy itself. So the philosophy is very simple. You are love. That's the infinite source within you, where you've come from, where you're going to, and ultimately what you're seeking. And the philosophy suggests when you can tap into that and express that without boundaries, and I don't mean that in terms of the
sacred
important
boundaries.
That you need to hold for you, like eating and everything you need to do to be functional, but conditions maybe is a better word, and resistance, then that's where we really experience true liberation. But for me, this was, again, a long process of listening and observing. It wasn't something that I sort of sat down one day and thought, if I was to write or construct a philosophy of life, what would it be? I had a very different journey finding this. I guess now is like the way that I endeavor to live my life every single day, to be free in love, and to give love without expectation, without condition. That's where I find the most peace. And it's beautiful to see that hopefully the way that I've framed what ultimately is a very ancient message that has been told by many, messengers and leaders through the millennia and beyond, has maybe put it in a frame that people can connect with and understand. But I would say that's because when I left performing school, so going back to my earlier story, and I went through the clinical health system. So I was struggling a lot with anxiety, which ultimately led to a life-threatening eating disorder. And battling with anorexia over that time, I really got to meet people's relationship with vulnerability, and fragility, because unlike a lot of mental health challenges, what I was going through was so physical. And so the way people reacted to me day to day was such a deep insight into their relationship with pain, their relationship with vulnerability, and the reaction for the most part was very much like, didn't know how to talk to it, didn't know how to be around it, resistance, avoidance, ignoring, rejection, which obviously was very hard for me being in that, especially so young. But interestingly, I even then had the insight that it was actually less about me and it was more about their relationship to whatever they saw in me.
And how old were you?
That was 16, 17 when it was really, when my struggles became that physical and visible. But I'd been struggling, for quite some time before that. But again, like a lot of us that have struggled, often those struggles are invisible scars that we're carrying inside. But I guess that was unique in that it was very physical. I was very visibly underweight, and people couldn't sort of hide their reaction to that. And so my mind started to think, well, if the people that love me most don't have the capacity to be present with the suffering I'm in, to the point that, you know, they either can't be around it or they'll do anything to sort of deflect the conversation when they are around me. What does this mean for us, you know, as a world? Because we've got some pretty major social, cultural, environmental, spiritual, political challenges, even back then, you know, that was always front of mind for me. I was always thinking about the world from a very young age. But this inability to be present with pain, this inability to be present with vulnerability, what is that creating on our planet? Because there's no way we can heal these heal the pain of the world until we're willing to be present with it, until we're willing to face it. And so that was really a very deep contemplation for me. And then getting thrown into the health system, I mean, it's interesting because the diagnosis of anorexia nervosa is it's a physical diagnosis. Like, it's considered a physical health problem. It's a loss of appetite. Obviously, it is physical, but the core, the roots of it are so not about food, you know, that just becomes the fixation. But being treated that way and then having that insight into the health system where there was just, again, no presence, no humanity. I wanted so deeply to restore that, you know, culturally. But of course, that felt like an impossible challenge. And I didn't want to be someone that, as I started to heal, you know, I had had my epiphany, and I feel very blessed that I did. I had one leader in my life that was a total angel, that showed me what leadership, love-based leadership, really meant, and quite a come to Jesus moment through the darkest times, you know, for me, which was really a surrendering of, it was an acceptance that I didn't have control over the illness anymore. And in surrendering control, I ultimately had this incredible experience of unconditional love for the first time, which was a very spiritual experience for me. Sort of the combination of those two things, I realized that there was a truth that could heal, and love does have the power to heal, but I didn't want to go and preach that. I wanted to go and sort of validate whether or not, you know, other people suffered the way I was suffering, and if this would be something that could support them. So I bought a van and I traveled for 2 years as a teenager around Australia listening. I'd create spaces and invite people into spaces, and, you know, 11 years ago, like, this was considered like such a taboo conversation. No one wanted to have these conversations. No one wanted to talk about speaking the truth, vulnerability, mental health. Like, I'd be lucky if 2 or 3 people rocked up, you know, to these workshops. But interestingly, you know, it had this momentum. It took a lot of grit on my end and consistency. And I treated those 2 people like, you know, they were an audience of 2000s. Like, that's one thing I always, I think, did well. I met my audience, no matter how small,
or big,
or big, you know, as sacred, because of, you know, the grace that I had experienced of the healing. I was like, truly, so many people say this, but the pain I had been in, if I could help one person not be in that pain, that meant the world to me. And so that's really where I was coming from in those spaces. And interestingly, the less, I would say, you know, the less opinion, the less interjection, and the more space that these participants had to sometimes just be in silence, by the way. Like, a lot of it wasn't even talking, it was just presence. Not only did the group start to get bigger, each community, because it was like the community was telling the next community about this weird, you know, process that I was facilitating. But actually the healing became more profound as well, which even back then I was like, you know, what really is this? And I guess my faith in the power of love just grew every single group, every single conversation, every single time, until the point we were seeing whole communities where schools were starting to integrate these listening circles, where basically the rules were no judgment, a space of love and acceptance, and we're all going to hold the silence until someone feels to share, and then we're going to acknowledge each other. Like, it's so basic, but these communities and schools that were so just rife with violence and bullying actually started to repair, because people were seeing each other. People were coming up to me after workshops and saying, I've tried to heal, my mental illness with medication, with in clinical environments, and nothing's been as healing as simply just listening to other people's stories. And it's that sort of feedback that I was like, love is a resonance, and it does the healing for us. We don't need to do anything. We just need to allow. The problem is a lot of us don't believe we're worthy of that love, and so we're constantly, pushing it away. What's always readily available to us when we surrender to it and when we allow it in, and we believe that we're worthy. And it was through that my faith became unwavering. It was through listening that my faith was really like, this is like, love's the way. And it allowed me to just take bolder and bolder action. I put some of these case studies together, and I started to advocate through a parliamentary friendship group. And it was a lot of it, I feel, kind of on my path was divine intervention. Like, it was the right place at the right time, and the right people were exposed to the message, and doors kept kind of opening, none of which I credit myself for. It was really, I think that's what starts to happen when you serve love, and you serve divinity, and divinity starts to work through you because you're available to it. One of the talks I gave in government, Australian media in particular never ever reported on suicide. It was quite taboo. And there was an Australian personality that had taken her own life before the launch of this event in Parliament. And people had said to me, like, you're insane for wanting to go and speak to politicians about this. Because basically my premise was, all this money that you're spending on crisis intervention in mental health, we just need to be like loving people. It just seems like such a pointless kind of thing to run an event on in many people's minds, in that world and space. And what's new about that message, blah blah blah. But the morning after this suicide, the ABC, which is like Australia's version of the BBC, wanted to report, because it had been so sort of publicly announced, because she was found. And they were looking for people to talk on the subject. And I was having this event in Parliament House. And so I had, some of the best coverage, an hour-long interview on the ABC about this methodology. And so it was that brought over 100 politicians to the event. And then it was that event that opened the door to an invitation to become a national commissioner in Australia, which made me the youngest commissioner in history for mental health. And so it was a lot of stories like that was really, it was so out of my hands. Like, there's nothing I could have done to sort of make that happen. And that's continual, all through even now. Doesn't mean there aren't dark times, as we know. There's definitely still dark times. But I think that's also when it's most important to really know where your faith lies, and to, no matter what, find it in you to understand that it might not make sense right now, but if you hold that faith and you're on a big mission to bring more love and compassion and light to the world, the light really does always prevail. And more than ever, we need those messages. Like, we need creations that are devoted to that. And interestingly, like, building tech now, being more and more surrounded by Silicon Valley kind of thinking and personalities, many people that are serving companies that would have historically been the unicorns, being the tech companies that were the next big thing, a lot of those companies are struggling to raise capital because of the climate we're in. And I actually really feel that there's a shift.
Yeah.
There's a shift in, because we are in difficult times, and I think that will continue over the next few years. Financially, I believe we're on the verge of a recession, if not already in one. The investment, where money is going to become more conservative, but I think what we're going to see is people investing who have money in things that they really, really, really believe in. And I'm definitely seeing that money is starting to shift course, and that's very exciting. That's what I wanted to see happen in government. I wanted government to stop investing in crisis and start investing in prevention. These tech companies that have huge funnels to make massive profit and then exit, I actually see less of those companies right now getting the money, and I'm seeing mission-based companies that are less interested in an exit and more interested in a legacy. They're the ones that are actually being supported right now.
I love that so much. And it reminds me of this quote that Daminush Shafiq shared. She's the director of the London School of Economics. And this is not verbatim, but it goes something very close to this. In the past, jobs were based on muscle. Now they're based on the brain. In the future, they'll be based on heart.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the director of the London School of Economics.
Totally.
Right. And it speaks to that so deeply. And you and I understand this, right? But how do we get this message out so people really understand this, right? And that's why I can say wholeheartedly that I am your biggest fan, because I know how and what you're doing, because I know the quality of the love that you choose to trust in and lead in and through. And I feel like faith has become also a very taboo topic, but when we universalize it, right, and we talk about love in and of itself, which is the greatest force in all of existence, and you can't deny that. We've all had those experiences, right? And I love how right now, if you're listening in, I'm just going to share how there's like an actual beam of light beaming down on Nicole.
Yeah.
Can't make that up.
Which is even weirder.
What?
At nighttime too, like it's just coming from the skies.
From above. But yeah, and it's light here. We're in Switzerland and you're over in Australia, and it's just like night and day. But light and love come from the heart, right? And there is scientific evidence now that is coming to light more and more and more, right? And what I hear all the time from clients, from people that learn about the power, the actual power and science and mechanics of the heart, energetic heart, I get this all the time. It's literally a dumbfounded question of, how is this not taught at school? How, like, how is this should be taught at schools, or how is this not taught at schools? Right. And then right. And the fire that it builds up in me, the more, because I hear this every single time, right, when I'm sharing this information. And it's just like, oh my goodness, like, imagine a world if you and I grew up in schools that taught all this, right? The world that we would be in now would be completely different. And at the same time, there is that divine order, the divine timing, that everything gets to happen for a reason, that you and I, we had to go and got to go through exactly what we went through in order to, create Standing Light and Love Out Loud. And, so it's just so incredible to be able to be having these conversations, which, similar to your van experience back then. I mean, it was like weird, people were just almost scared to approach you. Right. And then the next wave, right, is going to be actually speaking upon what we would call faith or belief or trust, right? And going deeper into that taboo. And it's this constant unveiling of the next taboo.
Yeah, that's right. But it's actually like the way I see it now is that taboo is, or the outcasts, or the crazy,
Divergence.
yeah, they're holding a possibility beyond the mainstream. So of course ideas are going to come to the people that don't fit the mold, and this is like going back to what I was sharing about feeling that isolation, or feeling like you were the kid, or maybe still the person that's observing and not really a part of. There's actually such a gift in it, because I mean, I can only imagine, because I've never really felt, I've never been someone that's like walked into a situation, whether it be I don't know, a group of people, although there might be people I love in that group, or a community, a city, a workplace, whatever, where I've been like, oh, this is completely it. There's always this part of me that's like, I don't know, I'm just seeing it differently. And on one hand, that could be such a source of pain, because as a human, we want to, we just want to connect, we want to be a part of. But I think when you find that ultimate belonging in love, and the fact that you are connected to all things, if you can really cultivate a deep strength, inner strength, and a self-security in that, these differences are such an asset. And of course, they're going to be the minds, you're going to be the people that progression is moving through, and true evolution is
Right.
moving through. It has to be that way. When we look back, we might look at something that used to be totally taboo and is now completely normalized, and the mainstream don't even think about the fact that that was totally taboo.
Right.
It's the pioneer. And I see this now even in mental health. Like when I was saying, in the early days, especially in government and like political advocacy, oh, we need community-based solutions, people were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, they were just like, no, mental illness is a biological predisposition. It's a chemical imbalance. It's treated through drugs. You're never going to actually fix it. You're just going to manage it. Yeah, that was truly the source was, that's, you were born that way, and that's just how it is. There's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Deal with it. And as a teenager, I was like, what is this viewpoint? Like, I was being looked at as like a crazy for saying, hey, well, maybe actually there's environmental reasons people are stressed and anxious. Maybe there's cultural reasons people are depressed, but that was considered a really out there thought. Now we have major campaigns like Are You Okay Day, every sports person, politician, celebrities talking about mental illness, the royal families talking about mental illness. It's and about how we need to be there for each other, and how it can, you can live a contributing life beyond a mental illness, and mental health is a spectrum, and all of us exist on that spectrum. It's now a very mainstream conversation, but 10 years ago this was not a mainstream conversation. And those people that were pioneering that conversation, it's within them that they have the insight to be like, oh yeah, cool, like the mainstream's caught up. But like the reason I'm passionate about this is because a lot of the time when you are a pioneer, or you're on the leading edge, or you're a visionary mind, that pain can become so debilitating that it can potentially break you. Right. that separation from the world. Yeah. And you can't, if you really know that what you're seeing is true, there will come a time that all of the people that mocked you, are going to be quoting you verbatim and taking it as their own, probably, as their own ideas. And that's you just got to come to peace with that, and have connections in your life that are kind of on a similar journey in their own way, and fall in love with that process. Like now I see it as an adventure. It's cool to be able to see things differently, and maybe see things before other people see it, because you get sort of the heads up, and also you get the honor of being able to design it.
Yes.
If those who can see, we are moving into a civilization of love. We are going to have, whatever way you see it, the new earth, 1,000 years of peace, through every prophecy there's a different way that it's talked about and named, but ultimately the core of it is we're going to move into this golden age of humanity that doesn't have violence and suffering and fear as the baseline of our existence. And if you can see that now and you believe that now, that means you actually get to be a part of creating it and shaping it. And that's incredible. That means every choice that you make, every system that you design, really is going to have such a long-standing impact on that world. And that's a beautiful thing.
And I think we can't even, again, coming back to the worthiness, we can't even imagine the impact it will have, right? Because we don't feel worthy enough to even be a seedling of that impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could even break it down in natural term and technological term, but we're talking about, there's no difference, but you could either look at it in terms of like, we are the coders, we are coding our new reality, the golden age, right? Whoever is seeing that program, right? They're getting to code that program into existence. And then if you look at it from a natural perspective, we're seedlings, right? We're seeds. And if you understand how the electromagnetic field of the heart works, like it's literally, it is a seed, right? It's a seed of consciousness influenced by your thoughts and emotions. And then Earth has an electromagnetic field as well. So does Father, Son, right? So it's just like, we are, if we consciously connect to our heart and our field and understand that we are the seed within our own field, which creates and shapes our reality. We are the seed within the greater field, which seeds and creates the collective reality. These are both ways to look at it, right? And it's just like, okay, so then it's a matter of choosing to just have that indomitable faith and open up. And yes, it's scary because our history shows that kind of person gets killed, gets burned, gets ostracized, gets, just put out of society. And we're not built for that, right? We are social creatures. We have that coding within us that if we are outside of the tribe, we will die, because we used to, right? Like back in the day, like if we didn't exist within a tribe, we would die out in nature by ourselves most of the time, right? And so there's still that biological part built into us. But I think understanding now that there are so many of us, there are so many artists, all around the world that are receiving these codes, these visions, and remembering ultimately, right, what life can be and ultimately was originally designed to be. But we just got to go through these darker times to build resilience or whatever. Maybe it was manipulated. What?
Yeah, whatever that is.
Whatever that is. That's a whole nother podcast that I don't know if I'm equipped to
a bunch of rabbit holes, that one. Yeah.
Millions.
This is a really good point that you make. It's actually worth like going into that a little bit deeper for your listeners, like the fear of that ostracism, which is ultimately being read as the fear of death.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I totally agree that we need to look at the fact that there are many people that are speaking this message, and you're not alone, and you're supported in that. But what's been really interesting about studying rite of passage is actually a fundamental point throughout history, except for our society today, the Western civilization. A very fundamental part of transitioning into a meaningful existence and to really have true belonging, which isn't defined by the validation of others around you. During an initiation, especially coming of age, there was always some form of confrontation with death. There was this acceptance that you will die at some point. And why I think that that's so profound, and why it was embedded inside all of those initiation practices through tribes and various civilizations of the past, is because that's the sweet spot where we can actually serve a mission greater than us. But if you don't have that confrontation with death, and I think in our society, that doesn't usually happen until maybe like a midlife crisis, right? So you've spent your whole life in this child mentality of the world revolves around me. I'm not responsible for anything outside of me. That's that's the mentality of many men and women who are still boys and girls in our society. But the ancient teaching, and how that was facilitated was, okay, you're 13 years old, you're a boy, you need to leave the tribe and hunt a tiger. You have to be confronted with the fact that you're going to die, and that's going to create this shift in you, which is imperative for you to be a contributing, healthy, responsible adult. And I wholeheartedly believe that all of us have to go through that initiation if we really want to, if we want to realize, if we want to reach our potential, and we want to understand what we're really here to do, which I believe is serve, give. That's it's loving out loud. It's, to me, this is the ultimate meaning of life. Professing to define the meaning of life, but in a way I really do believe that this is where, through my observation and my experience, which is all I can speak from, when someone shifts from the world revolves around me, so I'm a part of the world and I'm here to contribute to the world, it's there that they find value. It's there that they find worth. It's there that they find lovability. It's there that they really start to receive back what they're giving, and they're in
communion,
a proper symbiosis. Yeah, exactly. A union with life and with God and with everything around them. And by default, their respect for nature increases, their respect for their body increases. Everything flows from that place. Give with the same hand you wish to receive. And I don't really believe we can get there until we accept our death. So as intense as it might be to actually ask the question, what am I willing to die for? I think it's a really, really important question that all of us at some point should be asking ourselves, because when you know the answer to that, if there's a message that you actually would be willing to die for, it doesn't mean you're going to, but be willing to, then all of a sudden your sense of aliveness increases, because the length that you'll go to, for that, the effort and the care and the devotion that you'll put into it amplifies, and so does the quality of your life. And yeah, I think that's something that I would invite everyone that has a message in their heart to contemplate. Because I've also seen, and I'm sure you've seen this too, people that have come through retreat, say, that are in the much later part of their life, in their 70s and beyond, that have spent their whole life preserving something that's not actually meaningful for them. They've spent their whole life protecting assets, money, or their own identity, or things that ultimately don't have this deeper meaning, and they haven't really lived.
Right.
And that regret, I think, is so much worse.
It is. Well,
yeah. So to die, at 40 and really have lived true to myself, than die at 100 and never met that truth inside of me.
Right. Dr. Zach Bush speaks a lot about that, because he spent time with people that are passing, and Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross as well, right? Which is how she founded that caring system and for people passing. But it really is that. It's like, at the end of the day, when you're about to pass on, wherever you believe that is that you're going to go to, or nowhere, what will you be able to feel and say in those final breaths, right? And there's what just kept coming in as well was, there's this street artist, when I lived in New York, it was all over the streets. Maybe you've seen it, but it was this, I forget the image, but it had some kind of heart in it with like maybe even an arrow through it, and it said, "Protect your heart." And there was this kind of rebel in me that just wanted to go take, like, redesign it and say, "Project your heart."
Yeah, that's right.
Totally. Because if we whatever we do out of fear is going to contract us more and more and more. And this is scientifically proven, right? Your field will contract in the emotion or experience of fear. And yes, of course, if you're being chased by a tiger, you've got to activate that fight or flight response, and your field will contract just so you can be quicker. But when we are just in our normal natural state of living, of being present, We've got to understand how to expand and project our love, our energy, our field, to really let all of that light in, all of that love in, and to feel that first and foremost through and for ourselves, so that we can emanate that as well.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, protection. It's there's this Osho teaching which I really love, and the teaching is don't be the Meisner. And the Meisner is the old, sort of depicted as this old lady who is has all the jewels but spends all of her time and energy just protecting. Like, she's not enjoying them. She's not out in the world spending them and sharing them. She's spending all of her energy protecting them. And so what's the point? And be honest, in your own life. I've seen it countless times with people that I've held in these really vulnerable places, people coming to terms with, they have all of this stuff, but they don't enjoy any of it. They still they don't feel rich inside, because they're spending all of their energy preserving. The person that has nothing, but they're totally free and expressed, that person's truly, they have true riches. And the counter teaching is a teaching called the Fool. And Osho says, that the fool is the person that everyone judges, that no one wants to be, because the fool is the person that gets stolen from and continues to give, and gets lied to and continues to trust. And the fool, whatever they have, it doesn't matter who it is, the fool just gives it to them because they're a fool. And no one wants to be the fool. But what they don't realize is the fool is really the person that is the most fulfilled, because they can't, you can't give what you don't have. And so the fool always has a richness because they're choosing to give. That's true abundance. And I just think that it's so beautiful. How often do we look at someone that we think has everything, but actually there's so much emptiness in that. And then we look at someone that maybe in your view has nothing, but they have freedom, they have sovereignty, they have so much love. Yeah, they're liberated, they're free. That doesn't mean, I don't think these things have to exist separately, but I think as soon as you start to define yourself by the material, it's a very slippery slope to a very unhappy life, because it's not ultimately what you are. And if that comes into your path because that's a part of, I don't know, your mission, for instance, even now, as I grow my mission, part of my practice, as more resource comes to us, my practice is really focused on my team. How can I create an environment? Like, I feel so honored and so grateful that I get to be a leader to them. How can I make sure that they have everything that they need, so that they're coming to work every day being like, I cannot believe I get to work in this environment. I can't believe the way I grow, the way I expand, the relationships I build. I have to become, in order for me to stay humble on this path, so much more interested in that than, the material gain, because that's just a means to be able to facilitate that impact and change. And I think if you can really set your true north in that direction, of course, abundance will come, but you really need to understand that abundance of that nature doesn't mean anything when you're living that way, because the focus is the impact. So it's a paradox, it's a catch-22. We think that we're going to have all this stuff, but really, like, the way that you get that and remain rich and whole inside is by giving no fucks about it, actually, and being totally preoccupied with where that's being directed and the change that it's actually making in the world.
Right. And knowing that you are the infinite well, right? Where you get to continuously feel that love, that unconditional love, which is boundless, it's infinite. And when you feel that streaming through along with the inspirations that come through, right? There's nothing richer. And this saying came up as well, where it's, we have this term where we say we're foolish in love. Again, the fool, right? But
Yeah.
I think when we flip that on its head, quite literally, and we realize that we might not, especially in the reality that we exist in still to some degree, I always have come to understand that the mind, or let's say the head, because the mind I feel like is in its own way being redefined as we speak. I mean, I am actually also redefining it right now. And I'll share more about that eventually. But the head, the head, right? Its ego expression will want something specifically, and it'll say, okay, I want 5K in the next 2 weeks, for example, right? And the mind is stuck on receiving it in a certain way. So we're stuck on how we want to receive it. The heart knows it will happen, but it also knows that it doesn't know how it will happen.
Yeah, it's less interested in the how.
And once yes, and once it actually comes in, I've found personally that it's always surprised me. You know, I always had this moment of, oh my goodness, I actually, whoa, it's here, it happened. And it's almost like an anticlimax a lot of the times, because you're just like, oh, I thought it was going to be way greater, or it was going to come with like, you know, sparklers,
yeah,
whatever it is, you know. And then it's just so humbling to recognize yourself and your ego in that moment, and say, wow, okay, I can call in and manifest what my heart truly desires. And it's probably most of the time not going to happen the way my mind thinks it needs to or wants it to. And that
Amen.
and that is faith, that is trust, that's surrenderment, right?
Well, you're creating space, you know.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
I so agree that with that perspective, the mind's so interested in trying to control what it looks like, and rather than like, you know, hating on your mind for that. And I've come to be like, oh, like my mind's really trying to help me feel safe, you know, by trying to control, you know, and give me some certainty, you know, in what ultimately is always an infinite, anything could happen at any time, you know,
Right.
like so there's two ways that we can relate to that. And again, it's our relationship with change, which is always every breath, you know, every millisecond.
Change is constant.
Constant, yeah. So your relationship to change, if you're not fully in awe of change, if you're not there for it in every single way, of course your mind's going to be like, it has to be like this because it's trying to help you feel secure. And it probably deserves a bit of reassurance in that, you know. It's like, it's, the world is a really complex place, and the mind's doing its best to simplify that for you. The beauty of the heart, the intelligence of the heart is, as you said, there's an innate sense that everything you need is already here. And so within the context of that faith, so much spaciousness can exist, where it can come, you know, left field. It can come in the most unlikely of ways. But here's an awesome trick. If you practice, or, you know, every time you see that, even before it's happened, one of the things I really love to do is practice gratitude for what I don't have yet. So actively be grateful for something that I haven't yet received. It's supercharges the process.
It does.
It really supercharges the process.
Yeah.
Because it's all here now. And like, even if you were to think about it through the mental lens, think about it, you know, really sort of intellectually. If I was to say the color red, you know, and you were to look around right now and notice everything in your environment that's red. So for me, there's a chopping board over there that has tomatoes on it. There's a bowl over there that has a red rim. You know, there's some red in that picture behind me. None of those things I was focusing on before I said red, and now it's all I'm seeing. And this is how everything's working all the time, you know. But when you think, oh, the only way that I'm gonna see red right now is by getting a texture out and drawing on a piece of paper, you're missing how abundantly it actually is around you all the time. And it's the gift of the mind that it can focus down, and it's also the curse, because it can limit us when we don't know how to keep our mind open. And I think that comes from a service to the heart. When we let our mind be the servant to the heart's always in that expansive state, and then the mind's trying to verify what the heart knows. And how powerful is that as a combo? Right. Your mind's constantly serving and calculating the intelligence of the heart, which is, confirmation bias, that the heart is always leading you in the right direction, is awesome. Confirmation bias only sucks when you have really negative self-beliefs that you're perpetuating all the time. But if you have epic beliefs, like the world is infinite and everything my heart desires is already mine, if that's what you put your mind at work to, how amazing will your experience of reality become?
I love you so much. Oh my God. I trust that the world will be okay because you exist.
All of us.
I want to share this, maybe we can leave our audience with this little exercise, and I want to share this with you as well, because and I studied quite a while with Bob Proctor and his teachings, and to what you're saying, and really being grateful for something that hasn't even fully arrived in the 3D yet in physical form. I started writing, I am so happy and grateful now that whatever, right? And I wrote that 10 times. So I was literally seeding it and coding it every single day for, I don't know, do it 21 days or whatever you want, however long you want, but really stating that out. I am so happy and grateful now that, and then whatever it is, if you want to see red in every corner of your house, or, whatever that thing is that unicorns, whatever. I mean, you'll start seeing posters randomly, or somebody with this unicorn socks, magic is real. It's all around us. We just have to believe and focus in it.
Perspective. I remember this one time, it's so important that people understand this, because the control of the mind with the expectations that it has to, can only exist if it's like this, limits our experience so much. Yeah. This one time I was lying down watching the stars, and I had this amazing, sounds sort of psychedelic, but really I was just in this meditative state where I felt myself sort of coming closer to the stars, because it was such a clear night that they were just so amplified. And I had this sense that there was no separation between me and the stars, because it's all there was, And as a kid, I always used to say, I want to know how to bring the stars to Earth. And in that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I just brought the stars to Earth, through presence. And it's not, the mind's like, oh, you literally have to get a rocket ship and get that star and bring it down to Earth, but no, that was a real experience of feeling completely one. I was on Earth and I brought the stars to me. That was real. And that's all perspective. Yeah, that's all perspective. Kids are so good at this, by the way. Just go and hang out with kids. They're not allowing the
how to get in the way.
Yeah, that's right. When a kid's like, I'm an astronaut, they're an astronaut. There's none of your negativity is really relevant in their lived experience of that moment. And we can exist in that all the time when we let go of the rigidity of our minds. Right.
And imagine if we didn't have the adults slowly but surely saying, you're not, you're not. Imagine if we actually gave children full range to continue on believing that they are a full-fledged astronaut. What that would create, right? Yeah. and it's the subtle reality, right? That's ultimately the realm they're seeding in and creating in. And it is also the reality that the heart operates with and through and by. And in that space, reality is built. But when we don't believe in that subtle reality, because it doesn't operate within the confines of the five senses or matter, it's still becoming matter. But when we know that that is reality, just reality being born, and we continuously feed and seed that space, there is no other option but it to eventually become matter and real reality, right?
Yeah.
So I think more and more, the more we choose to love out loud and really feel into that subtle magic and power of our heart, and let our mind, this beautiful part of us that isn't bad or trying to hinder us, which is also, I think, another narrative shift that we need, because there's so many people trying to kill the ego or annihilate the ego or separate it. But that's, again, you're just causing more separation and more pain. But using, and coming full circle, but using the like parts therapy, right? Internal family systems, and starting to love your ego and create a little creature out of it, you know, like my ego is like this nutcase. Yeah, it's like this little weirdo that just like constantly is trying to hinder me and stop me, but like protect me ultimately. And I have this constant biofeedback conversation going on and saying like, it's okay, dude, hang out, just like scream, do whatever you need to, but like I'm still doing this. We're gonna be okay. We're safe, you know?
Jump in the passenger seat, just don't drive the car. It's just validation, you know, that personalities come. It's really like, it's so healing when we understand where our egos come from, you know, the personality is being created through all of your experiences.
Right.
Every time that someone wasn't there to protect you in your mind, in your feelings, especially as a kid, those formative years, these parts of your ego formed. You know, every time your heart was broken, every time you were disappointed, it could be the most subtle. You know, maybe dad said he was going to pick you up from school at 3 p.m. and he was there at 3:07, but you felt that, you know, because you're so sensitive as a kid, and dad wasn't true to his word. And these little micro moments where there's so much innocence in you, actually. There's this little part of you that's like, I don't want to have to feel disappointed again. So it sort of builds up and up and up and becomes this this personality, you know. And it's ultimately, it's you as well. Like, even though it's not you, it is you. And it's this accumulation. Like, if you were to separate your ego like you just did and look at it and be like, oh, that's an accumulation of all of my experiences and how I've related to my experience, you know,
From a fear-based and scared perspective.
Well, totally. Well, we're not the personality, right? Like, our heart, our soul's infinite, but then we're still having this experience. And so to know ourselves through the lens of the ego, through the lens of the personalities, it is an intricate masterpiece, actually. Like,
oh, completely. I mean,
so,
kudos
so
to that part of us.
Yeah, there's so much intelligence in it. And that's, if you start appreciating it, it will have so much less power over you.
Exactly. Yes. And establishing that relationship, right? A loving, compassionate relationship with it, saying like, listen, you can scream and cry and I'm going to love you up and I'm here for you. And go into this beautiful bed with all the pillows and stuffed toys and hang out here, right? And we're going to get in the passenger seat while you take a nap or have your tantrum. And I love you for your intelligent, what?
That's all that part of you ever wanted in all of the was that love,
the nurturing.
And we can give it to it, those parts of ourselves, every time it comes up, those triggers, those ego responses. It really is an opportunity to love ourselves more, you know, and to fill ourselves back up. And not, so it can feel like such a hard journey to stop focusing on the external and to really be like, I can be that for me. Like, I can actually, in any moment, I can reassure myself. I can be my own cheerleader. Just know that, you guys, like, that's, you don't need that, you know, if there's a relationship you're in or a boss you have, or I don't know, a family that you're trying to prove something to, people you're trying to get love from, when you really start getting this, they're going to start showing up completely differently as well.
It's true. What are you most excited about moving forward with Love Out Loud?
I'm really excited about what we're creating, the tech, because I feel like it's a over a decade's worth of thinking that's going to be able to stand on its own and support people at scale. What the tech can do is, imagine you were trying to cure or heal an illness, and you calibrated yourself against the statement, I'm in perfect health, and you came out, so we provide a C-score out of 100%. So say you were 17% aligned, so that's looking at your conscious mind, subconscious mind, and your somatic response to those that stimulus, those statements. It would then be able to guide you to the actual blocks, so the experiences, the trapped emotions, and clear them in real time. So what that can do at scale, like, obviously I'm so excited about what that can do to an individual, but imagine, for instance, there was a, God forbid, a nuclear war that was announced tomorrow, but we could send a push notification to 500 million people and say, hey, Leyla, would you like to align to the belief we live in a peaceful world, or I live in a peaceful world? Yes. And then have a way to calibrate 100% alignment to that statement at scale. We could eliminate that probability from the timeline in a completely non-violent, non-invasive way, just through human consciousness, which is like, mass meditation has shown this again and again and again. Absolutely. But it's a way of facilitating it rapidly, at scale, and actually have a system that can take collective focus and put it in the directions that we want. So the powers of what it can create is so infinite, and that's my latest obsession, because I feel like it's all of the things that I've loved about how I've done my work historically, but in something that can do what I was never able to do as one person, which is to have that scale.
I cannot wait for that to come out.
Yeah.
I'm already signed up. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience?
Just share this conversation, support this podcast, support this beautiful being, and always would love to know, from our conversation, what was the biggest takeaway. Actually let us know. It's always so nice to have that feedback.
It truly is. It really, really is. How can people connect with you, follow you, be with you?
All of the platforms, yeah. Most platforms is my full name, except for Instagram, which is Nicole Gibson.
Okay, we'll put it all in the show notes anyway, but it's been such an honor speaking heart to heart with you, and I love you so much. Thank you for the work that you're doing, you incredible artist. It truly is amazing to drop in with you from across the world and be able to share your beautiful resonance with the Standing Light audience. So from my heart to yours, I love you so much. Thank you.
Love you too.